Hello YouTube. Imagine an ancient Egyptian pyramid towering over the Siberian taiga, or the Roman Colosseum built about 5 days away from the nearest habitation. There are few people who have not heard about such unique and famous structures as the Egyptian pyramids, Stonehenge, or the Easter Island statues. But few people know about the Patomsky crater. It's a unique creation of nature, which is perhaps the most mysterious crater on our planet. It is located in Russia. Patomsky crater, a cone of crushed limestone blocks on the slopes of the Patomsk highlands in the Irkutsk region in Siberia. The crater site is located in the north of the Irkutsk region of southeastern Siberia, 360 kilometers from the district center Bodaibo. Patomsky crater was discovered quite accidentally in the summer of 1949 during a geological expedition to the Bodaibo district of the Irkutsk region during the work on the compilation of geological map of the USSR. Now, this unique structure was discovered by geologist Vadim Kolpakov, who at first took the crater to be an abandoned mine. But after the scientists realized that there were no NKVD or KGB camps, concentration camps in this place, so the mine could not be located in the remote taiga. The second thought that visited the geologist that it was an archaeological artifact. But the local people, Evenks and Yakuts, they did not resemble ancient Egyptians. They do not know how to build pyramids. And thoughts about the alien origin of this crater came to his mind. I'll give you a lot of scientific descriptions and language in this video because we need to find out what it is, and scientists were, I would say, the most interesting observers of this crater, and they did actual study, but it's a complicated story. So let me start with this. The description of the crater. The height is about 40 meters. The diameter along the ridge is 76 meters. The cone is crowned with a flat top, which is a ring-shaped shaft. In the center of the funnel there is a slide up to 12 meters high. The total volume of the cone is estimated to be 250,000 cubic meters, and its mass is about 1 million tons. Among the local population, this place is called the Fiery Eagle's Nest, also known under the names of Kolpakova Cone, Jabludinsky Crater, Yavalda Crater. There were 2 more expeditions to the crater that I want to talk to you about later in this presentation. But for now I'll tell you this. One expedition to the Patomsky crater was sent at the end of the 20th century. This expedition ended tragically, unexpectedly. When approaching the crater itself, the head of the expedition, a leading researcher at the Institute of Geochemistry of Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, Yevgeny Vorobyov, lost consciousness. He fainted. All attempts to bring the scientist to his senses failed. As shown by the autopsy, the Moscow scientist suffered a massive heart attack. Whether this was an accident, it's anybody's guess. But the research at the Patomsky crater found that within a kilometer of the crater, there is not a single large animal or bird that lives, and the radiation background falls down as the closer you come to the crater. In the period between 2005 and 2010, several joint expeditions to the Patomsky crater were conducted at the initiative of the newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda and the chairman of the Russian Federation Council, Sergei Mironov. the 2010 expedition. Scientists, on and off, have been studying this mysterious Patomsky crater. The first results stunned experts. The radioactive background on the crater was twice lower than in the surrounding area. There is no explanation for this yet. In addition, the crater is still alive. Something inside makes it go up and down. This was confirmed by an experiment on acoustic spectroscopy. With the help of a microphone buried in the crater, it was possible to determine that there are huge voids between the blocks that make up this anomaly. This means that the rocks thrown out of the ground have not yet had time to compress under their own weight. Additional proof of its youth. And another surprise that smacks of mysticism, the disappearance of an entire Yakut family, 4 generations of which have constantly lived near this nest of the fiery eagle. Russian researchers met them 1 year and learned about their strange history. In the family, all heads of the family did not die naturally. The next year, their house was empty. It seems that the Yakut family left their home several months before and were in a hurry. Toys, clothes, axes, and other valuable items in the taiga. Well, all those items were scattered in and around the house. After a thorough study of the crater, scientists received more questions than answers. So, according to the magnetometry studies, it was found that at the depth of 100 to 150 meters lies something with a high content of iron, and it changes the magnetic field so much that the instrument sense changes in the area twice the size of the crater. How the Patomsky crater was formed has not yet been determined. Whether it was a meteorite fall, an underground nuclear explosion, a lightning strike, the appearance of kimberlite pipes, diamond pipes on the surface, or maybe an alien ship fell into this Siberian territory. Questions about the origins of the Patomsky crater are still hotly debated by scientists. Those that know about the crater, let's put it that way. According to professor of the Institute of Geochemistry, Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, doctor of geological and mineralogical sciences, Sergei Antipin, only 2 hypotheses can be considered seriously now: volcanic and meteoritic. But the problem is that scientists have not found any meteorite material in the crater yet, and there are no volcanoes, even ancient extinct ones, in the area for almost 1,000 kilometers. This area is considered to be absolutely non-volcanic. I want to look now at the scientific description of the crater. Geological and geochemical studies as part of the complex expeditions in 2006, 2008 and 2010 indicate endogenous causes of crater formation, which are obviously related to the development of the deep magmatic process. Endogenous means produced or synthesized within the organism or system. Already in 2006, it was established that the Patomsky crater is a ring structure with a distinct zoning, which reflects the sequential formation of its main structural elements: the outer slope of the cone, the ring shaft, the ring ditch, and the central hill. The crater is located among the terrigenous carbonate rocks of the Proterozoic Mare Formation and is a bulk cone composed mainly of limestone, but it also contains other rocks: sandstones, metamorphosed shales, feldspar carbonate, and quartz veins. When mapping the crater, it was found that the highest part of it, the ring wall, is divided into two parts by a shallow depression in the terrain. At an early stage, an inner rampart was formed, composed of strongly weathered gray limestones. Among these limestones, there are single blocks of metamorphosed shales and sandstones, often quartzitic. Individual large trees grow on them. The outer latering shaft is composed of dark gray, massive crystalline limestones that have been poorly weathered, and there are no large trees on them. The formation of Patomsky crater apparently ended with the formation of the central hill, which is the area of its top, which in the area of its top is represented by massive crystalline limestones, minimally affected by the processes of weathering. Now, this is according to some scientists. The previously assumed meteorite hypothesis of the origin of the Patomsky crater is not supported by comprehensive research. According to such scientists, unique in its characteristics, the geological object is a circular structure of the central type with a bulk cone composed of limestones and other rocks. Patomsky crater was being formed for a long time, about 500 years ago, and its formation is associated with endogenous processes, the main role of which was played by the arrival of a deep flow of gas and fluid components. It is established that the eruptive material in the form of blocks of sandstones and shales among limestones brought to the modern surface was intensely carbonated. As a result, a mineral association of carbonate minerals was formed in the terrigenous rocks: calcite, siderite, anchorite, and fluorite. The discovery of individual blocks of terrigenous rocks with anomalous geochemical characteristics within the crater makes it possible to assume the existence of a sub-volcanic magmatic body at the depth that determined the material features of the Patomsky rocks. Magmatic refers to molten material beneath or within the Earth's crust, from which igneous rock is formed. Now, let's look at other descriptions of the crater. Above the bright green taiga stands a gloomy gray mountain with a smooth, as if cut by a knife, top. It dominates the local landscape and attracts the eye from any point where it is only visible. For its construction, according to scientists, it would have taken at least 500,000 tons of stones. The discoverer of the Patomsky's crater, geologist Vadim Kolpakov, told Russian journalists that in the summer of 1949 he explored the Badaibo district for the purpose of compiling a geological map of the USSR. And he says that when he first saw this crater, he thought the heat was driving him crazy. From a distance it looked like a giant mine wastebasket. So he even thought, where are the people who built it from? This is a remote area of the taiga, and there were no NKVD, KGB labor camps in this area. He knew that for sure. The second thought is the archaeological artifact. Again, the local Evenks and Yakuts, they are not ancient Egyptians. They didn't know how to build stone pyramids. It was time to think about the mysterious Hyperboreans, supposedly that in ancient times created a powerful northern civilization. But the crater, well, it's really is what can be called fresh. The rocks on the outer ring wall did not even have time to weather and grow moss. Kolpakov estimated the age to be 100 or maybe 500 years. Now, the number we know that scientists don't really like to talk too much about the Tunguska phenomenon of Tunguska meteorite because there are too many legends and stories around it. But some researchers found connections with another Russian mystery and the Patomsky crater. Now, the Tunguska event of 1908. To them, everything comes out very logically. Let's assume the Tunguska object, a meteor or a meteorite as it is believed, fell down, but not in the Irkutsk region, but in the Krasnoyarsk territory. But they didn't find the object there. And from the supposed crash site to the Patomsky crater, if you put a straight line, the distance is only about 700 kilometers. For bolides or bolids flying at speeds up to 70 kilometers a second, this is just an extra 10-15 seconds of flight. Maybe the Patomsky crater is just the funnel of the Tunguska meteorite. Everything matches in the age too. That's what I thought. The tremendous event over the Patkamena Tunguska river occurred in 1908, over 100 years ago. And this coincides with the initial estimates of the age of the Patomsky crater made by the geologists of the expedition. Remember, he said maybe 100 years, Kolpakov mentioned this. But let's look at the age of the crater now. Viktor Voronin, a doctor of biological sciences in the city of Irkutsk, calculated when this anomaly, Patomsky crater, was formed. All cuts that are made from trees age from 170 to 130 years, give or take 5 years, said Voronin. So the crater must be at least 230 years old. But for the tree to start growing, the wind must place soil on the stones. The natural conditions of the Bodaibo district is such that it took another 20 years. So his estimate of the crater's age is 250 years. So this hypothesis with the Tunguska meteorite, it failed. Patomsky crater was formed from the fall of a bolide, if indeed it was that celestial body that formed it, in the middle of the 18th century. The fall might not have been noticed. At that time, although this territory already belonged to the Russian Empire, people did not live in the area per se, and actively exploration of the Bodaibo district began only 100 years later, when gold was found there. But we're dealing with the taiga and the people there, and I know a little bit about it, so I'll talk about it later. Scientists had to conduct a major experiment to try to determine what might lie deep under the crater. Professor of Irkutsk State Technical University, Doctor of Geological and Mineralogical Sciences Alexander Dmitriev said this: magnetic survey with a proton magnetometer is the easiest and fastest way to determine iron ore deposits. If there are deposits of, for example, iron or other ferromagnets under the ground, the magnetic field strength here increases sharply. It is very fortunate that the Patomsky crater is located in an area where there is almost no iron ore. And if the magnetic field in the crater is higher than in its vicinity, then it means that something with a high content of iron ore, for example titanium, really lies under it. The magnetic survey of the crater took all day. Every 10 meters it was measured, then it was recorded, then it was recorded again. The central hill, ditch, outer cone, then down the embankment, along and across. It's hard to imagine a more tedious job. And finally Professor Dmitriev announced, I do not know if it's a meteorite or a spaceship, but there is definitely something under the crater. Something with an abnormally high contact of iron or other ferromagnets for these places. Processing of magnetometry data showed that this something lies at the depth of 100 to 150 meters, and it changes the magnetic field so much that the instrument sense changes in an area twice the size of the crater. I still think that we're dealing with a meteorite, concluded the professor, but with a strange meteorite that did not explode on impact with the earth, but as a drill went deep inside. But no one has ever seen such meteorites, so it's too early to give up the volcanic version. On the last day of the expedition that he's talking about, all the personnel were sent to dig holes around the nest. About a meter deep, when I pulled another stone from the pit, water started to flow from below, said the coordinator of all scientific research in the crater, director of the Astronomical Observatory of Irkutsk State University, candidate of physical and mathematical sciences, Sergei Yazov. There seems to be a lot of water under the crater, and it is the water that freezing every winter and melting by summer makes the crater move and change its shape. This could seriously hamper the drilling operations that we would like to perform next year. And you need to drill, so scientists expect to get on the trail of this unusual artifact and get it out. Well, at least they hope to. It is already clear that if a meteorite fell here, then the meteorite is not that easy, continued Sergei Yazov. Only a super strong body could penetrate the earth so deeply. On our planet, neither natural nor man-made materials of this nature exist. The version at first glance is fantastic, but we can talk about a fragment of a neutron star with a density of billions of kilograms per cubic centimeter. Such objects have long been known to astrophysicists. A piece of it may have collided with our Earth. Now, it seems that the specialists of the Moscow Institute of Problems of Mechanics of the Russian Academy of Sciences are now the closest to the solution. Well, it seems to them. After conducting a number of experiments, they proved that the cause of the anomaly was really a body that fell from the sky, but not a meteorite, and it was some heavy-duty object. Since the Soviet times, our laboratory has been working on estimates of the depth of penetration of rigid bodies flying at high speeds into the ground. This was done by the order of the military, Soviet military, who were interested in the behavior of the heads of ballistic missiles, warheads, when they hit the surface, said Igor Simonov, doctor of physics and mathematics, head of the laboratory of wave dynamics of the institute. So when we got the images and all the dimensions of the unusual Patomsky crater, we decided to use our research to check whether it can be formed from the fall of any such body. We created a model based on two assumptions, explains the scientist. There was a blow to the hill with a high density and strong body of cylindrical shape. Cylindrical, since a spherical object could not have penetrated so far into the interior, resulting in a huge amount of rock being pushed to the surface. At a certain depth, our object stopped when it reached an underground cavity filled with gas under high pressure. The existence of such lenses is known to geologists. The gas, like a piston, slowly pushed the rock ground by this object to the surface. We made a mathematical model, continued the Russian scientist, and the calculations showed the reality of our assumptions. Moreover, we even conducted 2 experiments in the laboratory, where river sand and granite chips were used instead of limestone rocks of the Patomsky crater. In both cases, the shape and size of the resulting craters almost perfectly corresponded to the proportions of the natural crater. But what is this mysterious cylindrical object, he was asked, and the scientist said, I have no idea. I am a mechanic and I can't talk competently about the nature of this body. However, since the Patomsky crater is a unique phenomenon, it is logical to assume that the impact object that caused its formation also ascended due to some exceptional reasons. However, the very fact that the formation of such a body somewhere in the universe or within a solar system, it doesn't cause much controversy in science. Well, he was asked, can you name the size of the object? According to our calculations, it turns out that its approximate length is 6 to 16 meters. The diameter of the cylinder base is about 3 meters. I cannot be more precise because I don't know the speed at which it crashed into the slope of the hill. Is the object still intact or did it blow up? There was definitely no explosion. This is evidenced by the shape of the crater. Chunks of rock are not randomly scattered over a huge area, but carefully, probably very slowly squeezed out of the bowels. What is the depth of the object when it entered the volcano? At 100 to 300 meters. I repeat that we do not know the speed at the moment of collision, and I can only give approximate estimates. Now, in the expedition conducted in the summer of 2008 at the crater, a mass of samples, about 100 kilograms, was extracted. All of them were still processed in various scientific institutes. We're speaking about 2000, I would say about 2012, 2013. I am not sure what's going on right now. I would like to find out if there are any more expeditions planned, but I do not think that there will be too much information published in the media. But let's continue. There's a lot more to say. Now, again, it was found that at a depth of 100 meters, previously considered 100 to 150 meters, lies an unknown, highly conductive object that goes to a depth of almost 600 meters or more. Previously, it was believed that the body was an iron-containing alloy the size of from 5 to 40 meters. This object doesn't contain metals known to mankind. There are suggestions that there is a cavity filled with salt water. Several we know that after all these expeditions, the nature of the origin remains a mystery. Now I want to tell you something which was very unusual to me. During their expeditions, 12 people, 3 journalists from Komsomolskaya Pravda, where the science editor is Vladimir Logovsky, and I mentioned him before, and I've known him since 1991, maybe a little bit even earlier. So, again, 3 journalists from Komsomolskaya Pravda and Channel 1 TV in Russia, and 9 scientists. They could not carry such a large amount of cargo across the 200 kilometers of Russian taiga on their shoulders. So they had to rent an old Mi-8 helicopter in Bodaibo. Strange thing, when they showed the pilots photographs of the Patomsky crater explaining the way to get there, the route, the pilots scratched their heads in disbelief. We've been flying here for so many years and we have not seen this crater. Where this blindness comes from, it is unknown. How could you not see it? Well, those pilots, they're trained too. So something makes them not see it. Anyway, about an hour of flight and and from the helicopter, you can see the amazing view of the Patomsky crater. In clear weather, it is visible from afar. And it becomes clear why the Yakuts compare it with the eagle's nest. From a kilometer's altitude, the crater is really like a nest, a huge one, in the center of which lies a stone egg 40 meters in diameter. Now I want to talk about mysterious trees, so to say. Trees. In all publications about the Patomsky crater, mainstream Russian newspapers deliberately avoided the version that the reason for its formation could be the fall of something artificial, alien more simply, like a flying saucer. Because arguments about the invasion of aliens always cause irony in so-called reasonable people. But surprisingly, that is what a serious scientist, doctor of biological sciences, Viktor Voronin, head of the laboratory of the Siberian Institute of Plant Physiology and Biochemistry of the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, this is what he started talking about. His most recent interview was given to a Siberian newspaper in October of 2012. So, this scientist visited a Patomsky crater and came up with significant findings. In the last year's expedition, he said, a saw cut of a larch that grew at the edge of the crater was made, he revealed. As a single sample, it's not much use. Nothing substantial except for the age of a tree was defined. But some strange anomaly in the growth that has occurred in the middle of the 19th century attracted his attention. Known causes such as fire, insects, and other damage could not explain it. Therefore, during the next expedition, the collection of wood samples for Dendrochronological analysis was carried out according to his plan. When the tree cuts from the crater were delivered to the laboratory, he first determined the age of each tree. The oldest growing at its bottom dated back to the beginning of the 16th century. It was about 480 years old. But the oldest tree on the slopes of the crater had grown since 1770. It turns out that the Patomsky crater formed no later than the last date, and logically, maybe even a little earlier, 1770. A tree cannot grow on the bare rocks, so first the soil should have been formed, which is another 20 years. So this makes the crater at least 250 years old. So that was the finding. But yet Professor Voronin also found a strange anomaly in the formation of annual rings of all trees older than 200 years. Some of the trees turned out to have fallen in 1841 to 1842 period. Some just broke off at the same time, and in the samples the annual rings have narrowed at the same time, and soon they died. It got more complicated when the scientists analyzed the tree rings of the trees growing close to the crater. The same year, 1842, the tree rings have increased significantly and surprisingly held out at such a high rate for about 40 years, and then the rings sharply narrowed. The sharp jump in the growth of trees is either a sharp improvement in the mineral supply, or if some trees are cut and the remaining trees get more sunlight, said Voronin. It is unlikely that the forest spilled large amounts of fertilizer, but there seems to have been a massive inrush, and its cause are still unclear. But the sharp reduction of growth after 4 decades is not typical for this situation. He says that he knows only of one similar case, when, after the Chernobyl disaster, due to release of radiation, the growth of trees increased dramatically. Maybe we're dealing with something similar here. Yet now the background radiation in the crater is low. But maybe at some point of time, suddenly short-lived radioactive isotopes somehow got here, which had to date break up and later the radioactivity decreased to natural. So was it a radioactive meteorite, or he says, terrible to say, artificial space objects with nuclear fuel on board? There are trees that fell, and broken trees are there as well. Trees away from the crater generally grow quite inexplicably, and it happened in the same years. In general, it is a mysterious story. Is he really suggesting the remains of an alien spacecraft might lie inside the crater? He answers by explaining that in the mid-19th century, leap in isotopes is equivalent to the patterns that occurred in nuclear arms tests. In the Russian television NTV documentary aired in March of 2012, the scientists said it was an incredible mad jump of both strontium and uranium. He said he is a biologist, not a geologist or a physicist, and so he can allow himself certain liberties. And it was him who first voiced the version about a UFO apparatus falling there with its nuclear engine still on. So at first it hit the ground and it raised the first cone. Then several hundred years later, the engine blew up and pushed the middle bit of the crater up. This is where the strontium and uranium came from. This is his theory of the UFO origin. And when contacted by Siberian journalists in October of 2012, the scientists conceded subsequent work on the crater has thrown up another more likely explanation, though even this is not foolproof. He has taken a good measure of criticism for his UFO theory, yet he still says other explanations are as yet not definitive. His NTV television quote was a while ago, and since that time the scientists made a number of experiments and analysis that show that most likely it is a volcano. He had the only one like this in the territory, he says. It's not a typical lava volcano, but just it's like at some point gas exploded there. Of course, there are many strange things still about the crater. There is no unified, definite consensus about it as yet. Together with geomorphologists, they have decided that this is the most likely version, volcano. The strange thing that doesn't fit the theory, however, is that if it was a gas explosion, it would not have raised the temperature. And therefore, while the process of surface heating was certainly going on, there was an increased temperature level. This is why he was saying to his fellow scientists, guys, it must have been a nuclear reactor working there. Their answer was, how would it get there? And there are no traces of radioactivity there. Then, and he says, he knows that it sounds funny that a biologist reminded geochemists about it. He recalled to them, reminded them that there are short-living isotopes that last for only 30 to 40 years. That event with an increased temperature level was in 1842. He can give the exact year thanks to the 3 growth rings analysis. That was the year when the trees were falling there en masse, and this is when they all got scars. At the same date, and the same date was mentioned completely separately from Voronin by geomorphologists. They said that approximately then, in 1840s, something happened in the area, an explosion, or a kind of a push, a shove. Some analysis of trees sent by Voronin to the Novosibirsk Budker Nuclear Research Institute proved that during the period the growth rings showed a sudden jump of strontium and uranium up 3 or 4 levels higher than the norm, and held like this for about 20 years and then slided back. So where was this radioactivity from if it was a gas volcano? This was exactly his question to geochemists, And Voronin was telling them, is there a reactor under the crater? And the answer was, well, again, if it was a reactor, where would it come from? But where did the radioactive elements come from? Asks Russian scientists. They still have not answered, but we're getting towards the more reasoned position that says, let's forget the radioactivity. That, yeah, it looks most likely like a volcano, but again, the question where the radioactivity comes from remains unanswered. No one can definitely and clearly explain it. Alexander Pospiev, a doctor of geological and mineralogical sciences, insists the explanation is more prosaic and less extraterrestrial. Pospiev also has a mundane explanation, as for the odd tree rings, insisting, contrary to Voronin, that a gas-based eruption could raise the temperature. The changes in the size of rings discovered by Professor Voronin was caused by the release of heat, which accompanied the underground release of the fluid, and later the temperature went back to normal, and the rings changed their size back. Well, I want to present all the interesting information and all possible explanations to you. But I want to talk to you about something else now. Why the anomalous crater was not studied during the Soviet era. After all, the crater was discovered in 1949, and Soviet science has much greater capabilities than Russian science has now. The nest of the fiery eagle could have had a permanent scientific base. They could have sent scientists there. Dozens of specialists could be delivered by helicopter, and hundreds of tons of samples could be exported. Well, here is something interesting, and I will quote it now. I tried to organize an expedition to study the crater, says its discoverer, a former employee of the Irkutsk Geological Department and now Moscow retired person, Vadim Kolpakov. I sent letters to various departments, but to no avail. Then Soviet geology solved two large-scale problems: the search for uranium for a nuclear bomb and preparation of a detailed geological map of the country. Then they switched to the search for oil and gas, and the study of the Patomsky crater did not promise benefits. My superiors strongly advised me not to publish material about the crater in the media. And if the Academy of Scientists were interested in it and sent an expedition there, then it would still have to be maintained by geologists. Transportation, communications, general control. We would have had to share helicopters and all-terrain vehicles. And we had our own tasks and plans, which, as the Russian saying goes, blood from the nose, but you still have to get them fulfilled. In general, the conflict of interests of different departments took place. Therefore, at the time, no scientific expedition visited the Patomsky crater. Now, Vadim Kolpakov was sure that the scientists had never visited this area before the early 2000s. He was wrong. See, the editorial office of a major Siberian newspaper received very interesting documents in 2012. It turns out that a semi-legal expedition, or unofficial, let's put it that way, expedition visited the crater in 1963. According to one participant of that expedition, Lev Nikolaevich Shipkov, he is now chief mechanic of the Tomsk University of Control Systems and Radio Electronics. Here's what he said. Back in 1959, experts from several Siberian scientific centers created an informal community, something like complex amateur expedition community. I also became one of the members of this group. Our main goal was to study the Tunguska phenomenon and some other interesting areas of Siberia. In our free time and at our own expense, we went on those expeditions. Mostly, of course, people spend their vacations for this task. In 1963, we first intended to check the rumors about a certain monster allegedly living in the Yakutsk Lake Labinkir. But in May, on the sidelines of one of the scientific conferences, there were rumors about an incomprehensible Patomsky crater. And our plans changed. The expedition to the nest of the fiery eagle left on July 13. There were 13 people in the group, 9 from Tomsk, 4 from Novokuznetsk. And in the train bound for the Moscow-Lena route, the expedition was riding in the compartment number 13. He was laughing. And it's good that the team was not superstitious. The train took them to Ust-Kut, then by boat to Bodaibo. From there, by an AN-2 plane, the expedition flew to the village of Perevoz. The group walked the last portion of the itinerary. Horses carried picks, shovels, and scientific equipment. 5 days passed. Progress was also slowed by the fact that one of the participants of the expedition seriously severed his leg with an axe. He hobbled along on a makeshift crutches. Then the local Yakut, the guide, along with the horses, went back to the ferry. Look, the places, they're really very remote, deserted, recalls Ashipkov. He asked those who came to the site many years later, "Did you find our rifle in the crater? It was thrown there up a tree. It could have hung there for 40 years. No, sorry. The load was too heavy, so also one of our guys threw away his grandfather's gift into the taiga, special camera." The participants of the expedition had to check their version that the Patomsky crater was formed from the fall of a meteorite. To do this, they used several methods. Metallometric survey of the area with taking soil samples to study and search for anomalous particles. Rinse the rocks for the detection of small meteor particles. Search for relatively large fragments of meteorite in the vicinity of the crater which may have fallen during this alleged explosion. The first mystery, metallometry and analysis of rocks taken from different depths and at different points in the vicinity of the crater, gave an increased contact, or showed increased contact of magnesium. In some samples, 5 times higher than the background content. No one has attempted to explain this anomaly. But the main thing to prove the presence of meteoritic matter on the crater in this case was not possible. The second point of research presented more interesting results. A field laboratory was set up in the camp where scientists washed, listen to this, 800 kilograms of soil samples and collected 100 samples of magnetized iron ore. The sizes of these samples range from 0.5 microns to 0.11 millimeters. Starting with the sample number 6, there are some curved irregular plates with a silvery tint, very similar to artificial formations, such as steel shavings, microscopic fragments from a shovel, etc. These fragments are highly magnetic. In sample number 48, 5 metal balls with a diameter of 60 to 80 microns were found. There was a spherical body of the cone type, similar to those found in the area of the fall of the Sikhote-Alin meteorite in the Far East. The cone is transparent, yellow. A hollow ball measuring 0.11 millimeters was found in the sample 37. All finds can be easily classified into 3 groups. 1. Perfectly irregular spheres, hollow balls with a smooth, shiny surface. Some easily collapsible or collapse into pellets when pressed. Others do not. 2. Hemispheres with a smooth bluish or black surface. And here's some more information from the expedition report. We we also dragged a military mine detector into the taiga, recalls Lev Nikolaevich Ashipkov. in case there are large fragments of a meteorite in the vicinity of the crater. Unfortunately, on the surface and at a depth of up to 3 meters, nothing could be found. But the report indicates that a lot of large trees were found with mechanical damage, possibly from falling stones, stripped wood, stones that are stuck in the tree trunks, broken or fallen trees with debris. It is interesting that research was carried out, similar research, by participants of the previously mentioned Komsomolskaya Pravda expeditions in 2005-2006, but they were not able to find rocks or stones that are stuck in trees. All the magnetized finds of 1963 expedition were distributed by the participants of the expedition to several Soviet institutes for research. Oshchepkov added this: "I do not know where they are now. You see, our main task was the mystery of the Tunguska phenomenon. All our extremely scarce resources were thrown at it, because everything was done without the support of the Soviet state, at our own expense. After all, we did not find any obvious signs of a connection between the Patomsky crater and the Tunguska meteorite, and in general it does not look too much like a meteorite crater. That's why later it fell out from the sphere of our interests." But the conclusion of the 1963 expedition is as follows: "Unfortunately, the collected data was not enough to give preference to the meteorite or volcanic hypothesis of the origin of the Patomsky crater. It should be noted that the study of this phenomenon of this Patomsky crater was quite slow. Only in 1971, several photos of the crater were taken from a helicopter, and a few years later, the first expedition was sent to study it officially." We already know this is not so. However, there was little that could be done, just to question both hypotheses. Scientists have not found near crater any meteoritic substance or traces of impact of a celestial body on the Earth. So the cosmic version of the origin of the crater was considered unsustainable by mainstream science. Now, here is something interesting from an expert, and I will quote him. "Nuclear explosion without radiation. During the Soviet era, I repeatedly had to observe craters from underground nuclear explosions. When I saw the first photos of the Patomsky crater, I thought that in this case we're talking about the same explosion. The only difference is the presence of a slide in the center of the crater, which is absent in the nuclear cases. But it could have been formed later due to hydrological processes under the crater, which is located in the permafrost zone, as the experts of the Komsomolskaya Pravda expedition correctly noted. Therefore, I was very surprised that the radiation level in the vicinity of the Patomsky crater was very low. Well, it may not have anything to do with nuclear weapons, but it's still a typical underground explosion. And I agree with the calculations of your experts. It occurred at the depth of 100 to 150 meters. This was Afanasyev, a military retired person, lieutenant colonel of the engineering troops, who lives in Tula, a Russian city. Here's a claim from 2011. In an article titled "Is the Mystery of the Patomsky Crater Solved?" published in Pravda newspaper on July 29, 2011, Anton Yevseyev stated, "The Irkutsk scientists seem to have solved the mystery of the birth of the Patomsky crater. They believe that this interesting geological formation appeared as a result of the processes of freezing and thawing of rocks that occurred in the small ice age 500 years ago. In other words, the crater is essentially a cryovolcano, similar to that on Jupiter's moon Io. Space analogs of the Patomsky crater should not be found on the moon and Mercury, but on the moon of Jupiter Io, where such cryovolcanoes are quite common phenomenon of nature. However, if in general terms the mechanism of this formation is quite clear, then the location of the cryovolcano on the slope is still a mystery. I will conclude with this hypothesis. An alien object crashed into the Earth at high speed about 250 years ago. It broke through rocks like a projectile and penetrated to a depth of 600 to 700 meters, forming the main cone of the crater on the surface. Then, in 1841-1842, the object released a lot of heat, which led to the warming of the soil above it and changing the annual tree rings. As a result, the object ascended its entrance channel to a depth of 100 to 150 meters. The ascent probably took place in two stages, leading to the formation of the inner shaft of the cone and the slide in the center. As a result of the heat release in the channel below the object, the ellipsoid cavity was formed at its entire depth, gradually filled with underground water, which was revealed by electrical exploration. It turns out that an alien object similar in size and hardness to a giant projectile broke through the upper part of the Earth's crust, tried to get to the surface, but for some reason could not, and got stuck at a depth. Most likely the Yakuts called the Patomsky crater the nest of the fiery eagle, since their ancestors in the 18th century witnessed the fall of a UFO and used the name of the largest bird to make it clear something big was flying. A fire, because of the UFO was burning and glowing, and the place on Earth where the fire eagle fell, they called it nest because of the external similarity of the crater with an ordinary eagle's nest built on a rock. And if we consider that approximately in the same area, not too far away, in the year of 2002, the fall of the Vitim bolide was recorded, we can assume that the Bodaibo district attracts various phenomena of cosmic scale, like a magnet. I want to remind my audience on YouTube that I have a number of videos in my channel about Yakutia's mystery and cryptozoology, and ancient aliens, Siberian mysteries, Arctic mysteries, the Tunguska phenomenon, and more. It's time to start connecting the dots. I urge you, please look at my previously made videos about the Russian Far East, the area of the Russian Arctic, Siberia. Look, Russia contains many paranormal mysteries, and I'll continue telling you about them, as well as other parts of Eurasia, China, Mongolia, and so forth. What is poignant, moving to me about the Patomsky crater is that my father, Boris, had served in the Soviet army in the mid-1950s area. He told me stories of labor camps in the taiga, of prisoners released after Stalin died, and policies that were put in change when he served at those years, of cannibalism and strange encounters in the impenetrable forest, of wild and beautiful nature, of unbearably cold winters, and of people he met along the way, some good, some bad, some cowards, and some very brave, who stood up to cruelty and oppression. I hope you enjoy my research into the mysteries of my motherland, the country that was called the Soviet Union. And if you can support my research, the links are listed in the description. Thank you, and be safe.